That was Sarah.
Could I have everyone's attention, please? We have a little program planned for our guest of honor, and we know that everybody wants to have all kinds of individual private conversations with Garry. I think we've all learned through the years how great that can be. Garry, you have a chair.
No.
We are for once going to put you in your place, and we need you in that chair for the duration of this program. It only gets better, I can promise you. But we're here for a very special occasion. I remember when my name is Carl Brandt, by the way. I'm the president of the board of HECUA, and this is our opportunity to honor one of our absolute favorite people and marvelous contributor to HECUA, as to so many other endeavors, Garry Hesser. So thank you, Garry, for giving us this opportunity to come together and have lots of fun. I remember when I turned 25, that was not so long ago, but when I turned 25, my father said, wow, you've lived a quarter of a century. And that sort of impressed upon me the importance of reaching this kind of milestone. And we're here to celebrate a quarter century of service to what and I think most of us believe is a really significant, important, vibrant organization. So it really is an honor to be here. And I think many of us will be expressing our appreciation in various kinds of ways. I want to welcome everyone who's here today. We're going to hear first from a very special guest, a very important person in HECUA's history, and that's Nadine Cruz, who served for 10 years as executive director of HECUA, went on after that experience to head the Haas Center at Stanford University, is now engaged in what I find to be a fascinating year-long project of reflecting on, and I'm quoting here, how to become a mentor and elder to younger folks and how to live a sustainable life well into my 90s. And I want to learn from that. Would you all welcome Nadine Cruz?
Good afternoon. It is so wonderful to be back home in Minnesota. It truly is home. And I know Garry expressed surprise when he saw me because I just saw him less than 2 weeks ago at the National Society for Experiential Education Conference. And I said would only come back to this cold weather for important things like him. So what I'm going to do in the next few moments is to provide my sense, my perspectives, and why Garry Hesser is very important and why 25 years of his services to HECUA deserve some comment. So I wanted to share first why I feel I'm in the right place, and it's a wonderful gift to me to give me the role to say these remarks about Garry. First of all, like an old auntie or relative or good friend who comes to visit after a long absence, it's possible to see a lot of growth and development that may be invisible precisely because of its familiarity. The quotidian, while yielding treasures, can be invisible to the eye for its very familiarity. So I come as a visitor who can offer to see the treasures a little bit more acutely, I think. And today, a particular treasure, Garry Hesser and his 25 years of contribution to HECUA. The other reason why I think I feel particularly in the right place to offer some remarks is I'm no longer a spring chicken. Organizations, the good, the bad, and the ugly, have been part of my life for over 30 years. In the Philippines, grassroots, in community organizations right here in the Twin Cities, among Filipino Americans especially, associations of educators, leading two significant organizations, HECUA, and most recently, the 25-plus staff of the Haas Center for Public Service at Stanford, with many layers of organizational life. So, if I speak in tribute of Garry, you can better believe that I speak as one who is far less naive, that I've had my share of anguished human dynamics, confronted the proverbial ethical dilemmas and impossible tight corners. I'm a survivor of the bad and the ugly, and I feel I can speak for the good when I see it. And having come of age, when I no longer care as much about opinion makers, I am no longer capable of saying nice things just to be agreeable. So, there's so much to say about Garry, but I will leave it to a few other people who will speak to the specifics. So what I will do in the next few moments is simply to distill so much of what could be said about Garry and his 25 years by offering only two images of Garry. First thing that comes to mind when I think of you, Garry, is the keeper of the fire. In my 11 years at HECUA, there were many moments when the embers were dying or in danger of snuffing out, and Garry would rise to speak up and would express just the right sentiments or evoke HECUA history to light the fire or stir up the embers to illuminate. I had the sense of Garry committing to the social movement's mission to, as they say, keep on keeping on, not just for the moment, but to connect a rich and valuable past with a potential for an even richer future, with Garry reminding us that we're holding the connecting threads. I also had a clear impression of Garry taking on as a sacred trust the mantle of founder Joel Torstenson, who's here. I have an image of Garry being knighted to go forth to be keeper of the fire. I often tell students that one of my most fervent hopes for participants in experiential education programs is to develop and sustain a fire in the belly. That if they could have that, it will generate questions that will renew, enrich, and sustain them for a lifetime of learning and engagement. So I wanted to notice this about you, Garry. To me, you have been a significant keeper of the fire. You have carried on the sacred trust of sustaining the HECUA fire. Your fire in the belly has been generative, warm, life-giving, and your fire has been about the many iterations of the HECUA fire from original vision and mission to its present. As with any organization with any life at all, these will be contested, interrogated, examined, but without the fire, these can become futile intellectual exercises with no excitement, no motivation to do, as the social movement folks say, keep on keeping on. I want to notice another image I have of you, Garry, but let me share memories of you before I give it a name, the image a name. In my encounters with Garry, what I remember most is this blur. He was everywhere, and everywhere moving so fast. I thought he had powers of bilocation. A day in the life of Garry, I would come to Augsburg, visit for recruitment, and I'd be up and down the stairs with Garry, here and there, saying hi, hello, and he would have multiple conversations. I swear, he had conversations with 3 or 4 people at the same time, and then connect them. And there would be faculty, students. So he was weaving community on campus. Then leaving campus, I would just have left campus, and I'd be sitting at, for example, St. Martin's table, and there would be Garry volunteering, serving at tables. I said, how does he have time to do this? And so there was Garry weaving campus and community. And then we would find ourselves, I would find myself in Garry's home, or with baby Sarah, no longer baby Sarah, and toddler Sarah, which is unimaginable to me that she would be such. But there was the weaving of community between campus, family, the community. The message of your life, Garry, seems to be a commitment to weaving all of these parts. If you are part of one aspect of Garry's life, you became part of all of it. So, the second image I have of you, Garry, is as a weaver of community. Surely you have your own memories, all of you here, images of Garry weaving, so I won't belabor the image. But let me just now speak to why I think this role of weaver is significant, if not urgent, but often invisible and taken for granted. It is significant, I think, that the birthing of HECUA is out of the fire of social strife. It has been so with many organizations with a mission like HECUA's. It's a natural reaction to focus on the analyses of social issues. The dystopic dimensions of society become the focus of deep interrogation, sharp analyses of pathologies. But as Parker Palmer wrote in an article about communities of learners and lack thereof, every epistemology carries its own moral trajectory, paraphrasing him. So there's everywhere people who are socially aware, exquisitely sharp in their analyses, maybe even excruciatingly dense, as I find some of the postmodern discourse on power, control, and domination. But moving from analyses of these dystopias to creation of something more whole, from the brokenness of our individual lives and of societies, requires perhaps a different kind of knowing. So what I've noticed, Garry, is from the rich practice of your trying to make community happen daily and everywhere, you have developed the art of seeing it where it exists, to point it out to us when we don't even see it, and to create it where it is absent, to nurture it where it floundered. Another image of the weaver and why I think it's important, I had the great privilege of getting to know John Gardner, who served as health, education, welfare in the cabinet of LBJ. And right after 9/11, I remember running to his office really upset, obviously, but I also was concerned that the role or the image of the firefighter seemed to be the predominant one. And I said, but not everybody can be a firefighter, and we have made them into heroes. And not everyone can feel that what they're doing is important. And he said, we make daily choices to be healthy, the food we eat, what we do with our bodies. And he said, health doesn't happen overnight. So too, he says, about the health of societies. We build immunity by creating the fabric of health. And so I think of Garry's weaving of community as the daily civic arts, the daily acts of health to build immunity in our societies through the development of a fabric of community. So Garry's life, a life of weaving the threads of community that forms the fabric of healthy communities. This is different from the skill of breaking it all down, the fighting mode that comes from paying attention primarily to pathologies and being sharp in analyses. So I just want to end. I like the title of Parker Palmer's book, Let Your Life Speak. Garry, your life speaks. It speaks as an eloquent teacher of all those things that mattered to HECUA founders at its beginning. And I want to just quote someone who was very nice enough to provide this to me. I asked a number of people about you. Just wanted to make sure that all the things that I thought about you, still remained in the present. So, quote, he's a good man of high integrity. Sometimes I think this is more important to students learning than the content they have to master for the semester. I know he has influenced others' lives by the way he has chosen to live his. Another person who spoke about you, Garry, to me, who's a national figure in the National Society for Experiential Education, she said, the number of people who are truly as gracious as Garry is actually quite small. When I'm around him, I try to be as quick as he is to acknowledge, to thank, to appreciate, but I'm just a learner at the feet of the master. So I want to end by reading a bit from Parker Palmer's book, Let Your Life Speak. So the 25 years of Garry Hesser's weaving and firekeeping, what has this yielded for HECUA? And I just want to read this bit from Parker Palmer. He opines the sense of people embracing the scarcity assumption and fearing limitations and grabbing onto power and things because of the scarcity assumption. So he speaks about abundance. In the human world, abundance does not happen automatically. It is created when you have the sense to choose community, to come together to celebrate and share our common store. Whether the scarce resource is money or love of power or words, the true law of life is that we generate more of whatever seems scarce by trusting its supply and passing it around. Authentic abundance does not lie in secured stockpiles of food or cash or influence or affection, but in belonging to a community where we can give those goods to others who need them and receive them from others when we are in need. Here is a truth I offer. Abundance is a communal act, the joint creation of an incredibly complex ecology in which each part functions on behalf of the whole and in return is sustained by the whole. Community doesn't just create abundance, community is abundance. If we could learn that equation from the world of nature, the human world might be transformed. And so, Garry, your firekeeping, your community weaving, you have created abundance for HECUA, and the sum has been bigger than all of its parts, and it's been an ecology of relationships that are represented in this room today. Thank you.
Nadine, thank you very much. That is a wonderful beginning of our program. It occurs to me that one of the wonderful qualities of fire is that it spreads. And Gary's fire has spread. And we're going to hear from some of the folks that have been touched by him. They're on your program: Paul Peterson, Frankie Shackelford, Michael Eaton, Liz Andrews, and Lisa Helke. And I invite them to come forward in that order and make some comments in honor of our special guest.
Good afternoon. My name is Paul Peterson. I'm a recent Augsburg alumni as a Metro Urban Studies major, and as the program notes, I'm also an alumni of the HECUA Metro Urban Studies program in 2002. Why am I here today? For Garry, I just, as a recent alumni, I don't really have much else going on right now. Somebody said there'd be free food and friendly faces, so. Actually, in all seriousness, Garry was my advisor. He is the head of the Metro Urban Studies program here at Augsburg. I'm sure most of you know that. And anyway, my first encounter with Garry was I guess a little over 2 years ago. I'm a non-traditional student. I'm 28 years old. Some people don't buy it, but I am. And I decided to go back to school about 2 years ago to finally finish up my degree. And was kind of trying to decide where to go and what to do. And I came here and met Garry right in this room. He just said, the Marshall room is a comfortable place, gave me directions, and it was one of my first times on campus. And I met with Garry and talked to him a bit about urban studies and about sociology, and I was really impressed with, not only the sound or what the content of the program sounded like, but as Nadine had quoted other people saying they were just impressed with Garry as a person. He told me that he had just walked over from home. He lives, just south of here in the Seward neighborhood, and he's like, oh yeah, I just walked over here. Because I said, thanks for taking the time today. He's like, well, I live a 2-minute walk. And I was like, oh, that's really cool. He just walks to work, and then we proceeded to talk about just a bit about some Minneapolis urban history. And I grew up on the north side of the city, and he told me a bit about some of the things that went on in the north side after the Martin Luther King riots. And I was just really impressed with his experience in the urban landscape, and just as somebody who believes in and participates in civil rights and social justice. And I really credit Garry with being instrumental in my decision to going back to school and finally achieving my degree and joining the Urban Studies program. And after doing that, Gary's just been a really positive presence, whether it's been being a professor or following up with courses, being an advisor, recruiting me to participate in the Metro Urban Studies term, helping me with my internship at the Lindale Neighborhood Association, and just being a colleague. He's a man of all hats, really, and I mean, more than just the little brim hat that you see him wearing around every once in a while. He wears them all. So anyway, he's continued to really follow up with me now that I've graduated, and kind of learning that the reality of the nonprofit world and the government world right now, and in this economy, and trying to find a job. He's been, emailing me and following up, even though I've been graduated. He'll see me on campus and he'll say, I thought we got rid of you last spring, Peterson, and things like that. But he's been very diligently following up and sending me leads and just talking to me as soon as I came in here today. Despite all of us that are here, he came over to me right away and asked how the job hunt is going. And so I guess I just want to express that I really admire Garry as a professor, as an academic, and as a person who is committed to following up with his professional responsibilities and his personal responsibilities. And congratulations on 25 years, Garry. Thanks.
Long way down. Good afternoon. I'm Frankie Shackelford. I guess you can see that on the program. When I was invited to talk about Garry as a professor, I was initially stymied. I thought, I can talk about Garry as a colleague, a committee member, a co-facilitator for national issues forums, my spiritual mentor, my friend. I can talk about Garry as an Eagle Scout and an Indian dancer in Ponca City, Oklahoma. But Garry... But Garry the professor, I've never even set foot in Garry's classroom. Well, that's not exactly true. I've shown up for my own class on more than one occasion and found Garry still in the room from the previous hour, chatting with a lingering student or gathering together the leftovers from his 230 handouts. So I know Garry goes to class very prepared, and he stays late. And if I know Garry, he probably arrives late. Of course, one doesn't need to observe Garry in the classroom to know what kind of a teacher he is. After all, some of the most important teaching he does happens outside of the classroom. Over the years, I have learned quite a bit about Garry's philosophy of education, from campus workshops, from retreats we've been on together, and the roughly 10,000 hours we put in on the Experiential Education Commission together. I know, for instance, that Garry loves PBL, that's problem-based learning. And this is a kind of technique where learners, and he would certainly include himself in that group, focus on a compelling presenting problem. Now today my presenting problem is how to present a complex phenomenon like Professor Hesser in a form that mirrors his own teaching style and takes only 5.5 minutes. Okay. The first thing Garry would do, of course, is to find out who the students are. So if we had time, we would have to turn your insides out, as he would say, and discover what experiences you've brought here with you today. What have you heard about Hesser's teaching through the grapevine? Have you actually taken a course from him? Do you have a preconceived notion of what makes a great teacher, or a particular lens through which you view the teaching profession, say the lens of vocation or the sociological lens? Are you a teacher yourself? And most importantly, what are your goals for learning about this Professor Hesser? Then we'd start our mutual meaning making using Garry's trusty KK, KDK, and DKDK. So let's start with KK. You all know that is what is it we know we know? Well, we know Professor Hesser teaches sociology and urban studies, and that he has won major teaching awards, both at Augsburg and nationally. We know he does workshops on service learning all over the country. Garry stays abreast of cognitive research. In fact, we were in a session yesterday where he was learning the latest. and its implications for learning, and he can quote all the gurus on best practice. Heck, he even wrote the best practices for service learning himself. People pay him to share his knowledge of teaching. Okay, so we're pretty sure he's good. Moving on into KDK, what do we know we don't know about Professor Hesser? This is where we formulate questions that we go out with. Well, I'd like to know what it's like to be one of Gary's students, but we've just heard that from Paul. And I'd like to know what his colleagues in the sociology department and the Center for Service Work and Learning think of his teaching. So armed with those questions, if I were Gary, I would go out and design a real-world experience where we could, test this out. For example, we would spend the night in the residence halls, or maybe we'd go downtown to the Gay 90s or to Quest and interview Gary's current students. However, now that, and is the dean here? Yes. Now that all Augsburg professors are in training to teach online, I designed an e-experience. Okay, well, maybe I just sent out a few emails, but the response was tremendous. And here's a sample of what people said. Gary truly develops community. He really values student perspectives, but he challenges them to question what they see and hear and observe through immersion and service. One student said he had never known another professor to be at as many campus events as Garry Hesser. When his students play sports or when they perform on stage, Gary's there. Another student described Gary as fun, exciting, and somewhat sarcastical. This is a quote. But also as someone who helps people understand new situations. Colleagues in his home department said, Gary's what I would call a complete educator. He approaches education as a multidimensional process. In the classroom, he guides students to engage ideas and to understand sociological perspectives and theories. But beyond the classroom, he connects students with experiences. Of course, we know, and the HECUA experiences, internships, he's one of our best pushers for that sort of thing. In his office and in our department seminar room, I've observed him, and this is somebody in sociology, I've observed him as a teacher and advisor, asking great questions of students, and generally getting them to take command of their own education. Another one said, no one beats his discussions with students. No one. And finally, Diane Pike, his chair for many years, said, Gary is the best model we have for tying theory to the real world. And he's authentic. He lets students know that sociology matters and that they matter. Now, if we had more time, we'd go on to DK. But like Gary, I'm a little over-prepared and I'm running out of time. So I can't go on to the surprises, but most of what, what surprised you? What new questions do you have? Well, most of what I heard, I sort of sensed already, but I was surprised to hear from all of his junior colleagues in the social department, without exception, that Gary's also a great mentor for them. Frankly, I just didn't think he'd have time for that. So now I've added a new category. That's KNK. What do we know we'll never know? And the question is, how on earth does Gary manage it all? Everything, class preps, conversations, class meetings, workshops, appointments, serendipity, encounters, campus activities, scholarly writing, lots of travel in his daily run, or maybe several daily runs. What keeps him going with so much passion? I asked him this question a couple of days ago, and he left me a classic 14-minute Garry Hesser voicemail. So I'm not going to give you that answer, but I'll let him answer the question for you himself in a few minutes. And now I have just a teeny little gift for you, for a professor who lives the HECUA model and is always asking students to be aware of the lenses they use in the world and to shift them. I have 4 different lenses, all of which are portable and can be taken wherever you go in the world, different magnifications, and I hope that you enjoy seeing the world through all of them.
As you can see from the program, my name is Michael Eaton, and I have the pleasure of working with Gary in my role at HECUA. created a new acronym. One of the things that we at HECUA are fortunate to have is deep support at all the campuses we work with. And at Augsburg, there are many voices who believe in the experiences we provide, and it's so wonderful to see many of you here today to recognize Gary, and we also recognize you for your commitment to this type of learning. So thank you for being here. I've only been at HECUA 3 years, not 25. And one of my first experiences after starting in January was to come to the Augsburg Study Abroad Fair in February. And a couple of us were trading duties trying to talk to students about what these experiences are. And down the stairs of this building comes Garry Hesser, and not just stands at the table with us, but goes out to the students to ask them what they're doing, to ask them who they are, to ask them, not who they are, to ask them what's going on with them, because he knew everyone that came through the building. And one of the things that we're grateful for at HECUA is not only did he ask them what was going on in their lives, but he asked them what issues they were thinking about, and then pointed at us over in the corner with the tablecloth and said, and here's a place to continue thinking about those issues that we discussed in class that you've been talking to me about. And so it was very impressive to me as a new HECUA employee, and is still impressive to me today, how much Gary cares about the individual students and how much of an advocate he is for this type of learning and these types of programs. And so in honor of the walking billboard that Gary is, Gary, if you could stand. We thank him for all he does.
Never easy to go last. You always worry you might have been outdone, but we'll give it a try here. Lisa is my wonderful colleague, and she's going to begin.
Well, first of all, although it says in the program that we're representing HECUA, we're actually here as representatives of a corporation that we founded, EPC and Associates. And we come to you to present to you the Dewey Organizer. And they'll be on sale after the reception. So, if we could have the next slide. Michael's our technical person because it turns out neither one of us has actually used PowerPoint before. So, the Dewey Organizing System Company brings together the worlds of time management and civic engagement for social change in one sleek package, the Dewey Organizer. Unlike those other less progressive, less democratic planners, the Dewey Organizer, trademark, helps you organize your day's activities in terms of the likelihood that they will create opportunities for meaningful education aimed at genuine social transformation. The Dewey Organizer, trademark, grounds itself in the following easy-to-understand principles, trademark, taken straight from the work of John Dewey himself. And these, I think, are pretty self-explanatory, so I'll run through them very quickly. But, for instance, and you know how lucid Dewey is, so again, I don't think it'll take time here. Abstract time as a mathematical entity may be conceived as a unilinear dimension, but events do not occur in an abstraction. The historical line of sequence consists of many dimensions, and so on and so on. It is not because of the sheer choice of historians, nor because of literary quality and color that history cannot be written apart from geography, nor narration to proceed without description, and so on. More pertinent, perhaps. On March 25th, 1901, the acting president of Brigham Young Academy, etc., 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 since Dewey was, quote, due in Berkeley, California about the 23rd of June, he wanted to lock up the exact date. I think we see Gary all over this. In a letter 2 days later, he was able to be a little more definite about dates than when I wrote you the other day. How would it do for me to begin on Tuesday 11th and work through the remainder of the week, including Saturday? Again, we see Gary. And then finally, moving on a little bit more, the problem of the proper adjustment of school and out-of-school education is at once more urgent and more serious at the present time than at any previous epoch. Again. Moving on. Oh, okay, I'll do the next part too. Yes, of course. From these clear philosophical underpinnings arise the following concrete practices, trademark. Assume that you can be in at least two places at once, and that travel time between any 2 points is less than it has ever taken you under the best travel conditions imaginable. Learn to pedal fast. Work to develop your already amazing powers of concentration so that during a meeting you can read the minutes of the last meeting, read the minutes of some other meeting you're not currently attending, sketch out the idea for the paper you have to deliver next week, and say the most concise, relevant, and wise thing anyone has said during the meeting you're actually in. It's important in all such endeavors, at least in our corporation, to have clear delineation of the historical roots. Some fascinating archaeological findings. The Dewey Organizer is based in large part on fascinating archaeological findings traced to one man, Dr. Garry Hesser, living in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Dr. Hesser seems to have been a man extremely consistent in his attendance over the course of many years at Academic Programs Committee meetings of the Higher Education Consortium for Urban Affairs. He appears to have been equally consistent in leaving behind all of his notes at the end of every meeting. An unsuspecting must intern, looking through the meeting room trash for notes she'd left behind about theories for changing the world, came upon 7 years worth of records of all those notes Dr. Garry Hesser had made in the margins, on the backside, and between the lines on APC agendas, minutes, and program development proposals. The notes revealed an amazing depth and breadth of perspective, as well as an occasional wandering of the brainwaves to other things beyond the set agenda. More could be told, but the rest essentially is history. The Dewey moments will skip by, but it's important to recognize all of the Dewey or do-we moments that Garry has had over the years. From do we close down HECUA programs given the financial crisis? Do we have any idea how much the debt to University of Oslo actually is and how it came to be? All the way down to the final, do we have a meeting this Wednesday or next Wednesday? And as others have already commented, in addition to these notes, Dr. Garry Hesser's own daily planner has been left behind at more than one meeting, resulting in a veritable panic by said owner, as reported by those who receive his phone calls at HECUA in such situations. In reviewing the daily planner, it has been discovered that by following the Dewey Organizer concrete practice principles, the organized individual can, in fact, as Frankie said, be in at least 3 places at one time and touch multiple people's lives in significant ways all in one day. An excerpt we won't go through, but you can just take a look at the example. You've got him teaching 3 classes, advising 5 students, coffee with colleague X, lunch with colleague Y, check in with academic dean, hello to Z, grade 37 student papers on current trends in urban America. In the middle of his day, he's got quality time with a grandchild, over supper that he himself is cooking, and in the evening, neighborhood development meeting, pick up Augsburg students to attend, advocate for various causes, volunteer for 2 major projects at the meeting, talk with Em about her health and Elle about church council matters, head home to read fascinating new book on urban development and community building, and consider the possibility of sleep. Some other additional organizing tools that come in special packets. The serious Dewey doer will augment the use of the daily planner with these additional powerful tools for organizing one's life and the world. Venn diagrams for any occasion. For one low price, a packet of 50 or 100 Venn diagrams can be purchased, which can be used to frame almost any issue, conflict, or proposal being considered in a meeting. Buy extras to share with your family and friends. The Venn diagram, according to VennDiagram.com, the overlap areas are even more powerful than the circles themselves. Life occurs in the overlap areas. The overlap areas are where the truth is. And of course, as Frankie Shackelford has noticed, no planner would be complete without the knowledge builder. Another packet of pages has been developed that guides the user in building knowledge. What you know, what you know you don't know,
And what you don't know, you don't know. Over time, if used correctly, you should increase the number of pages in your what you know section, as well as in your what you don't know section. And for obvious reasons, the what you don't know section is the easiest one to maintain, as it contains no pages and requires no notes. What you know, and what you don't know, but colleagues can write pages, and here's one for Gary. Gary doesn't know that he doesn't know how lucky we all feel to have him as a colleague, a fellow traveler, and friend.
We're not done. So, and of course, as anyone of the user of that other planner, the planner knows, you have to have goals, and usually they're more petty and mundane, but in the Dewey Organizer you have life goals, so life goals the Dewey Organizer way. No organizing system, particularly no system aimed at educating for social change, is complete without a set of life goals and objectives. Studying the life of Garry Hesser, the man whose organizing style was the inspiration for the Dewey Organizer, trademark, as well as the source of so many of his concrete practices, we also find the fullest and richest embodiment of the goals of the social change educator. Keep the focus on what matters, the education of students for lives as meaningful participants in genuine social change. Quality pedagogy is at the heart of quality programs. It matters. Participatory democracy, civic engagement, social activism, social change, experiential education, service learning. Fashions in terminology may come and go, but the work of HECUA, the work of Hesser, goes on. Be cheerful, be of good heart, be optimistic, be sincere, be humble, be openly grateful for the work of others. Be Gary.
My guess is that actually it's probably out of the price range of most people in this room.
Thank you all. We wanted to reserve some time for others who would like to say something about Garry. We've got a good beginning, but I know there's more stories out there. So if people are so inclined and want to say something publicly, this would be a great moment to do so.
Here it comes. Thank you. My name is Genial Bob Clyde. Some would disagree with the adjective. I wasn't told this was going to become a roast anyhow. And besides Janie's little backing, I would guess. There are times when Garry doesn't talk. He's a man of words, right? A man of many words, right? And he very seldom is without words. However, it was my privilege to meet with him once in New York City. Was it 10 years ago, Gary, when Garry read the New York Marathon? Met him about halfway through the marathon to take his picture doing this trip through the 5 boroughs of Greater New York, a great urban study in itself, huh? Garry came over to the side to get his picture taken. He didn't say word one. He did get his picture taken, and all I could do was try to bellow out onto the Bronx, and he was on his way. But as many of you know, marathon running is a very personal thing, and this personal expression of Garry's was a little different. The other thing, he's been very helpful to me in my tour here with Augsburg over the last, what's it been, quarter of a century? Seems like it, doesn't it? Or does it? Once we were working on a proposal, as we did on many times, and it came to the point where we needed a resume of Garry Hesser. If he's going to be project director, it needs to be a resume, right? So we brought out the resume, and I thought, I probably didn't say, my God, I wouldn't say that. But I said, my goodness, let's just send in the resume and ask them to fund that. Well, we did, and the proposal was funded.
I'm Doug Irish, a former president and board member of HECUA. Was the one who signed the Articles of Incorporation when it began, along with presence of Joel Torstenson and Paul Wellstone, and I think Gary's probably there. I don't have a roster at all. If he wasn't, he was there in spirit. I can recall our having a board meeting in the basement of the University of St. Thomas, then the College of St. Thomas, wondering whether we could continue another year. We had enough money to pay off the staff and that sort of thing, and had to decide whether to continue or not. And that kind of spirit which we had, I think Valerie Pace was the executive at that time, we decided to go ahead on faith, which we did, and it survived, and under the care of Valerie and Nadine and Amy and others, we've had a marvelous success. It's an institution without an endowment, virtually. It depends a lot on current enthusiasm and current enrollment, and all the faculty representatives are important in that whole scheme of recruiting people. But HECUA is a marvelous program. I got to speak to the Columbia group once when I was down there on a Fulbright, and haven't led a HECUA group myself, but was involved in that way. So thanks, Gary, for that kind of spark which we hoped would ignite and kept it going.
Maybe I just... I'm Joel Torstenson. I used to be around HECUA a bit, and I like... And perhaps the greatest heritage that came out of my experience is the meeting the kinds of people that are associated with HECUA and the kind of people who are here tonight. So I thank you for carrying on the battles and keeping life going. You can imagine the memories that flow through my mind, but my articulation at 91 is not what it was at 75.
Thank you all. What's a celebration without some gifts? We've already had a few gifts that have been given, but there are more to come. And I'm going to call on Nadine for the first one.
This is on behalf of the past executive directors of HECUA, and there have been a few of us, and I think on some occasions we felt like floor sweepers of organizations. And so I found something that is made of walis ting ting, which in Tagalog is the tines from reeds that are for sweeping floors in the Philippines. So you imagine what kind of gift is that? But it's been developed, put together by an artist craftswoman to make a statement about elevating sweeping to a high art. So this is a gift.
And Gary, for a somewhat different kind of gift, one of the contributions you make, one of the qualities you have that's contributed so much to HECUA is what I like to think of as your hard-headedness. Now that's a quality that comes out in many different ways, and we were thinking about getting you an extraordinarily expensive gift, but knowing how closely you scour our budget reports, that just seemed dangerous. But danger is something that needs to be avoided at all costs, and we've tried to think of something that would make your world a little less dangerous. And so I hope that this will prove useful. You are well known. I mean, so much of you was captured in earlier discussions. I hope you realize that we all connected on several of those points. You are noted for rushing from meeting to meeting, encounter to encounter, from engagement to engagement. And our concern for your safety, our acknowledgement of that your hard-headedness is not everything that's needed to protect you from all the dangers of the world. We have a little something for you.
Wait, I know what it is.
And Gary, the final present that we have for you, you can't have quite yet because it's not quite completed. But that's a book of remembrances, which will, by the time this event is over tonight, and we've had a little more time to work on it, we'll be able to give to you for years to keep, that will include at least a lot of the recollections and thoughts that you will have about your 25 years of service to HECUA. And so this is with our love and appreciation. But you can't have it quite yet. It's still in the process. And it's over on this table, and we do invite everyone present to make some written record of your own thoughts about Gary and the contributions that he's made. I wanted to take this moment briefly to acknowledge the hard work of people who have put this together for us tonight. Judy Sharp and Simon took the lead. It has just been extraordinary. Lisa Helke, Stephanie Clausen, Michael Eaton, Happy were all involved in various ways as well. So I just want to acknowledge all of their hard work in putting together the event for tonight. Gary told us that he wanted to have the last word. And he did want to offer some reflections. And if there's one theme that I've heard emerging, I thought this is actually quite striking. People were invited to sort of speak from the context of the role that they had, the role of student, the role of professor, the role of board member, and so on. And no one was able to confine themselves to speaking from the perspective of one role. Because when you get to know Gary, it's just a much richer experience. And I can just would like to take this moment to add my own personal sense of appreciation for what Gary has brought to HECUA, but also brought to me. You know, whether it's lunch at St. Lawrence table, that's come up before, coffee at Blue Moon 2, walking out of board meetings and having half-hour, 45-minute discussions on the street outside. Whatever the context, I think I've learned tremendous amounts from you, of course, about experiential education, urban issues, and so on, but really, even more importantly than that, lessons about life. And you're an unforgettable character, and we're really very appreciative of what you've done for us. And we'll turn the podium over to you so that you can talk.
I think it died, but I've been known to be loud. Say, Gary, I only have 6 minutes of tape left. There's a part of me that says we ought to just say a benediction because, what do I say? But you know me. There's a little bit about standing here that almost makes one think one just attended one's memorial service, or at least the kind of retirement party. And I hope that isn't quite here yet. But maybe one image that is important to me, and I think was given to me by Yogi Berra, the great philosopher of the 20th century, who said, when you come to the fork in the road, take it. And in a very real sense, I guess I want to, just very briefly, and thank you for just staying around, is I've been one incredibly privileged human being. Because most of the time when I've been forced into a fork, sometimes not by my own choosing, people have drugged me, invited me, led me, and it's those serendipities, those unexpected things that have really been the mark of my life. And I just truly feel like an extraordinarily privileged human being. Put my sociological imagination hat on, and I try to reflect on my own biography in the context of kind of the social forces and social reality that we're supposed to do ourselves and get our students to talk about. Let me just name a couple. In 1977, I needed a job. I found an advertisement in the American Sociological Association. It was, as I said to Nancy at the time, I think they just wrote my job description. There aren't any places in the universe who want somebody to teach urban sociology and sociology of religion. I wound up having to teach statistics. You didn't tell me that at the beginning, right, Tim? The first social force that I encountered was to walk here and to be met at the plane by Joel Torstenson, and on the drive in from the airport to hear HECUA, must, sus, even to hear how we almost named the South American program LUS. But I encountered right then a powerful social force that said to me as I flew back on the plane, I hope I worked hard enough for that interview. Because that's where I want to be. Because what I met was Bob Graham's, Joel, a whole collection of people who were at Augsburg. But it was so much rotating around HECUA. Because what I met was people talking about crisis colony. I met Bob Clyde in time, who many of us don't know about Bob because he's such a behind-the-scenes worker. As Joel and Don Irish and other folks were sort of out starting this consortium, Bob carried the water. So often, he would write proposals that gave me prominence in this universe. And so it's that context, that Augsburg context, that I have just been blessed time after time after time again. A department then and a department now that is just a delight to walk up the steps and be a part of. What more can a person ask than to have that kind of social force, that kind of social reality over a 26, 27-year time to kind of be the context in which you can flourish and do the kind of things, and a college that supports what I'd love to do, and that has been an extraordinary gift. I've already mentioned Bob, but of course the gift in many ways of gifts that many of you all know was Joel and Fran Torstenson. How do you walk into another family and become a part of that family? Quite literally, we really are now, because my sister-in-law has married a nephew, so we are related. Quite literally. Not only a founder of this consortium, a person with vision. I wish we could also show on this slide a picture of Joe Bash and Joel Torstenson as we looked at it a month. Two people, two visionaries, who after Martin Luther King's assassination got on the phone with one another and said, what can be learned here? And out of that came HECUA, out of that came a context that I wonderfully walked into and have been drinking at that well and those many tributaries all these years. Chances then to be a part of the creation of the Center for Service Work and Learning, for the Center for Global Education. Augsburg has been that context. So I feel an extraordinarily blessed human being. Those social forces have really fed me. One other thing that I'd like to name. And that's my wife. All those meetings when you have 4 stepchildren at home to look after, to raise, while somebody else is running around the country doing and being all those things that I've been privileged to be. So it's not only a supportive institution, Augsburg, but an extraordinarily supportive environment at home. And not just my wife, but my kids. 3 kids. The little one that came home from the hospital with her mother the day the HECUA board came down for tea and Nancy was just starting to produce the nice milk. While Nadine sat in the living room. Well, it was a long story. What I simply want to say is that other powerful reality, not only of a person, a kindred spirit who shared the urban studies world since we first known each other, but the person who tells me what business do I have teaching planning. So it's not only the humbling, but the kind of just extraordinarily gift of having that reality that, as they say, has made all the difference. So let me kind of conclude. Frankie said I wandered on, which I did. But there's a quote from Bob Theobald who talks about healthy people. Well, I hope I'm sort of healthy. But the quote runs something like this. Healthy people are people who are growing and helping other people to grow. I feel like I have been an unbelievably privileged human being because I've been able to be in all these social contexts, from HECUA to Augsburg, to my family, to my department specifically, where each day I am in a context where I get to grow. And I get the gift of being a part of other people's growth. And in a sense, what more could you ask? Nadine already quoted Parker Palmer, and Palmer ended perhaps the most famous speech in higher education in the last 2 decades by inviting each of us to remember the academy should not be embarrassed by, in fact, it should reclaim a key word, and that's love. And so the context I've been privileged to be a part of, HECUA being one of its central legs on the table, has been one in which I've been able to show love, to be loved, to be a part of a discipline, to be a part of a study and analysis that I also love. What more could you ask than to be loved, to have a place to love, and to grow? Thanks. Obviously, there's more food, but thanks for staying this long. Thank you all so much.
And don't forget to record your recollections and what you remember.